I'm going to wager a guess that you've at least heard of speedrunning. You know, beating a game as fast as you can, but what about co-op speedruns? Say hello to an underappreciated subsection of the speedrunning community. If you're anything like me, then this area is unfamiliar ground. Not that there's anything wrong with it, of course. In fact, quite the opposite. Co-op presents a whole new layer to speedrunning, since teamwork suddenly becomes a factor instead of you solely relying on yourself. Not to mention that the tried and true routes planned out in the single player category generally become outdated when moving to co-op, which even further separates the two and helps co-op feel distinct in an interesting way. Now, as I'm sure you've seen, this video is about how I got a world record in a co-op speedrun. And I'd love to tell you it was in something cool like Portal 2, but no, it's a Sonic game. And not just any Sonic game, it was in Sonic 4 Episode 2. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I didn't wake up one day with the sole intention of speedrunning Sonic 4 on my mind. If I did, I would probably need psychiatric attention, so allow me to go back to show how any of this even came to be. It all started quite a while ago, actually. For those unaware, I've been competing in speedrun races against other YouTubers for the past year, which all began thanks to the YouTuber Unleash and his desire to host a race for, you guessed it, Sonic Unleashed. Naturally, this sparked my interest, since I happen to enjoy that game to at least a moderate degree, and after said race, we thought it would be fun to go through more of Sonic's catalog, which we've been doing. However, something you might notice is a common theme with the games we've run through is that they have all tended to be of the good variety. Most of the time. And I mean, can you blame us? Sonic as a series is often known for its, well, let's just call it inconsistency. And so for given a choice of which ones to play, of course we're gonna pick the good ones. Which means that by now, you might be wondering, how does that lead to Sonic 4 Episode 2? And that is a great question. I do actually have an answer. See, back when we speedran through Sonic Colors, which your boy came second place in by the way, Unleash had the audacity to say this.
Actually, you know what? Hear me out. Sonic Forest.
Now, at the time, I didn't think much of it. This joke had already been thrown around a few times, but then a certain Brendan had this to add to the conversation.
I have an idea. A Sonic 4 Episode 2 race, but like, there's teams, because you can do online with Sonic and Tails.
Oh, yeah!
Believe it or not, this sentence alone sold pretty much all of us. I don't think anyone was expecting Sonic 4 to be a great time per se, but it having online co-op built into it sounded like a surprisingly fun time, especially for a speedrunning race. So that was that. For better or for worse, we were en route to play Sonic 4 Episode 2. There was just one problem. See, the date that was decided on for this race didn't exactly work for me, because as it lined up, I was going to be on holiday in Spain at the time. And I knew in advance that the internet I'd have there would be bad at best, and given the circumstances, I thought I'd have to drop out of the race. As a shot in the dark, I asked Unleash if I could choose my teammate rather than being paired with a random one like everyone else. That way, I could check with them beforehand whether they'd be okay with me lagging. And luckily, I was given the green flag on choosing a partner. So, without any further ado, allow me to introduce Denny Meister. This guy right here was the easiest partner choice I ever could have made. But don't leave it just to me to convince you of that, I'll let his results do the talking. In the first race we ever did, Denny may not have placed first, but he did place in second. No small feat for a game as long as Unleashed, and he beat me by a decent margin in the process. But his track record doesn't stop there. The next race was in Generations, where he placed in, you guessed it, last place. But that was just a small hiccup. Denny is a fighter, and he turned it around in Sonic Mania, where he placed second last. Yeah, maybe it should go without saying, but Denny isn't exactly a pro gamer. At least if you just look at his results. In reality, the only reason he seemed a little inconsistent was because he was just competing in these races for fun. He would happily practice for a game he likes, like Unleashed, which he's incredible at, but the rest?
So many levels because I missed some stupid objective.
A red ring.
Wait, Denny, did you pause the stage to pull up the guy?
We are going to
Yeah, Denny tends to be a fan of the "fuck it, we ball" mentality. And honestly, what better person to compete in a speedrun race with? Not to mention, we'd already proven that we made a great team in the Sonic Colors race, where I gave him a few tips during his run to help him speedrun through the stages.
This.
Oh
See
my
this big
god.
window?
Did Edward die?
The big window.
There's like a big hole to your left, okay?
What happened?
Don't jump out!
I see it now. Now I see it. I'm not doing too badly.
Okay,
Just,
Danny, get ready to homing attack, okay?
yeah, yes. I pressed
Danny,
it, mate. Yeah.
homing attack!
I swear I pressed it. Buddy.
Okay,
It's
maybe
the-
we didn't start off as the most amazing team, but I saw potential. Denny and I were gonna make a great team, and Sonic 4 Episode 2 would be the game to make that happen. We were a little under time pressure though, as there were just 9 days remaining until the upcoming race, and I was already in Spain, which was obviously less than ideal. To start things off, we tried using the game's built-in online service to play the game together, which went about as well as I expected. My internet really was terrible, and it didn't help that I was playing the game on a Mac, which, fun fact, can't run Sonic 4 natively. Needless to say, this was unsalvageable. There was no way we were going to play like this, but lucky for us, there was another option. Maybe you've heard of Parsec, maybe you haven't, but to put it simply, it allows you to connect your controller, mouse, or keyboard to another computer via the internet, all while getting a stream of that computer's screen. There was definitely still lag, I'm not going to deny that, but this method of us playing was much more manageable. And the lag was only on my end, while Denny got to play the game natively. So thanks to that, we got straight to practicing. We played a few hours almost every day, and to be honest, it was fairly casual. We were just getting a general feel for it at this point, you know, learning the standard ins and outs of the game, which I suppose I may as well go over while we're here. First and foremost, what even is a Sonic 4 Episode 2? It's a platformer that wants to be like the good old classic Sonic games, but without the physics or controls that make those games as good as they are. To its credit though, it's certainly a step up from Sonic 4 Episode 1. Yeah, we don't talk about that game. Episode 2 has 5 zones: Sylvania Castle, White Park, Oil Desert, Sky Fortress, and the Death Egg, each of which gets 3 stages and a boss fight, except for the Death Egg, which gets 1 stage and a boss fight. As for the actual gameplay, like I said, it's similar-ish to regular 2D Sonic, just more streamlined and a bit dumbed down, but it still has its own quirks to it. Quirks like Sonic being the faster of the two. Sonic and Tails technically have the same top speed, but Sonic is able to reach that much faster and easier thanks to his homing attack. And as a result, Sonic's the one who has to do most of the work since he's generally in front. Because of this, it made sense for that role to go to Denny, since he wasn't under any lag. That left me with Tails. And what was my role, you might ask? After all, this game is obviously beatable in single player, so what exactly do I contribute to the team? To answer this properly, allow me to briefly touch upon the unique mechanics of this game. The tag team actions. The idea of these is that with the touch of a button, you can join forces with Tails for flight, swimming, and rolling. While these aren't very deep mechanics, I gotta say, I really like this idea. Not only does it make Tails finally feel useful, outside of boss fights, I'll admit he's always been good there, but it also meant that levels could now be designed with Tails' abilities in mind. And the game makes good use of this, as the tag team abilities are essential at multiple points in almost every stage. At least, if you're playing in single player. Because in co-op, only the twin ball team action is needed, while the other two can be bypassed entirely, which you'll definitely want to do when speedrunning because of the seconds of startup lag that they have each time you use them. The reason why you're able to get around some of these tag team sections in co-op is thanks to multiplayer specific mechanics like the safety ball. Every time a player falls off screen or gets left behind, they're automatically put into this state, and can jump out of it whenever they want. It's not quite to the level of responsiveness that Sonic Superstars has in terms of getting back into the action, however I still prefer how it's handled here since this game is much better at deciding which character it should focus on. Very rarely will you have to fight with the camera, whereas I swear you have to do that every 5 seconds in Superstars because someone thought it would be a good idea to give screen priority to the people who are falling to their death. There also exists a pull mechanic, where you can instantly pull your teammate towards you whenever you want, bypassing the safety ball entirely. This might sound toxic, and it can be, but it makes for some really nice teamwork when used at the right time. It's the combination of these two mechanics that makes co-op stand out from its counterpart, because in single player you can only control Sonic, yet the levels are built with both Sonic and Tails in mind thanks to the tag team actions. And it's exactly this that makes the co-op fun in this game. Because while Tails isn't always useful, he is important in every single stage. and especially if you want the fastest times. I should clarify though, I think the co-op in this game is fun for speedrunning. I don't know how fun it is outside of that, like say a casual playthrough, since we never did a blind run-through of the game. What we did instead was look up the co-op world record speedrun, and then tried following the route they'd created. So, a big shout out to these two legends. Without them, I'm not certain whether this video would even exist, so credit where it's due. Not to mention, there was commentary throughout their run explaining a lot of the tricks they were performing, since this very run was shown live at Games Done Quick, and that helped us out a lot since it made things much easier to follow. I really can't praise these two enough, they're awesome. And they gave us a lot to learn, most of which consisted of where and when we should use a jump or use an ability to stay on the desired path. Honestly, simple enough stuff. Anything we discovered that was too hard, we'd just find a safer strat for. After all, we were just trying to go fast to win a completely unimportant race between friends. We weren't going for a world record or anything. Now, most of what we learned was basic routing, which is obviously fairly uninteresting to showcase, but there were some cool strats to be found. While this game doesn't have a lot of sauce, it does have its moments, which I'd like to shine some light on, so here are a few of my favorite skips of the ones that we incorporated. Starting in Sylvania Castle Act 3, there's a spot next to some rotating platforms, where if you activate the twin ball at the right time, you soar over a bunch of platforms and make your way onto the fastest route. This strat isn't without its flaws though, because staying in the twin ball and timing your jumps correctly is technically faster by a few seconds. And yet, despite being aware of this, we would still opt for using the launch, because timing your jumps here is harder than you might think, which made it very inconsistent to pull off. Besides, the launch is a pretty cool looking stunt, and that's part of the reason why I like it so much. A similar trick can be done in White Park Act 2, where jumping at the right time in the twin ball skips entire segments of the stage where you're put into the background for a while. Which is a cool gimmick for sure, but skipping it saves a lot of time and is pretty easy to pull off. So unlike the previous skip, this one is pretty much necessary. Another important skip lies in White Park Act 3. See, there's a part in this level where it wants you to activate the swim abilities and slog your way through the water nice and slow. But you don't need to do that, because yet again, the twin ball is here to save the day. So long as you're positioned correctly and jump at the right time, you can blitz through the section and save a good few seconds in the process. Honestly, now that I think about it, a lot of the so-called skips of this game are all using the twin ball. Any other skip is better described as optimized movement rather than an actual skip, because believe it or not, this game is surprisingly polished. Like seriously, there are next to no glitches. Which is funny, I swear those are a staple of 2D platformers when it comes to speedrunning. Even Mario can't escape that curse, but no, not here. This Sonic game is about as stable as it gets. In all of our playtime, we only found one glitch, which I'll highlight a little later. Anyway, since this game is devoid of glitches, if you want to go fast in this game, it's all about good movement, learning the fastest routes, and knowing the right times to use the twin ball to speed through sections. All of which, Denny and I did our best to learn in time for the speedrun race that was about to take place. Which, admittedly, we could have spent longer practicing for, but we felt very confident going into it. Because there was no way the other contestants would practice for a Sonic 4 Episode 2 race, right? They'd have to be such losers. Since I'm on the topic, this does shine light on a legitimately good question. Why did we care enough to put all this effort into speedrunning a game that neither of us had any real connection to? Well, we kinda looked at it like this. The odds were undeniably stacked against us. Denny was somewhat known at this point for not practicing before the speedruns, and when you combine that with the lag that I was under, and the fact that we were running what's largely known as a mediocre game, there was genuinely no reason for us to practice for this race, let alone do well in it. And it's for those exact reasons that we did the exact opposite. We thought it'd be funny, and you know what? I stand by that thought. It both was, and still is, funny. I might have a bad sense of humor. Anyway, the day of the race was upon us. 10 contestants making up a total of 5 teams for this momentous occasion. I don't really know if describing how this race went would do it justice, so instead, here's a brief overview of how things went down.
This game sucks. Yeah, a little bit.
3, 2, subscribe that you're running on YouTube. 1, go.
Okay, and we're off.
Oh god! Oh god, the lag!
Uh-oh. No! No, not now. Please, not now. Please, not now.
Oh, they crashed!
Oh my god. Oh, pause.
So are we pausing? Paused.
An immediate pause.
X-Fool's game crashed? I think mine crashed too. Mine crashed too.
Oh no. Scully, pause. Scully.
Mother,
They're still going.
Fuck you.
They're still going.
Danny, quick,
I'm
come
being
on.
honest. Cool.
This is a mess.
Alright, somebody's finished with the boss.
I have no idea.
That's Denny. Oh shoot, Denny? Oh no, because he practiced.
Danny Meister, you're doing a pretty good job. You're in the lead.
Yes!
Hey.
I'm really happy that we decided to do this. I woke up for this.
Everyone shut up for a second. Danny Meister and Caldy are in the second zone of the game now, so get fucked, everyone.
Get fucked, everyone.
I'm just watching the gameplay right now. They are just going full speed.
Come on. Yeah!
Oh, dude!
And the station is
Play up. Please press X. Thank you. Didn't work.
Ah!
I tried to press the team button and it just didn't work. It crashed again.
So how Denny is already on Oil Ocean Zone.
What?
Pretty
You know
glad
what?
we practiced that jump about half an hour
Yeah.
ago. And that one.
Oh, huge!
God.
Needless to say, we won by a fairly large margin. In fact, only one other team was able to finish while everyone else dropped out due to this game's questionable online system. On our end, though, everything went really well. We messed up here and there, and our movement wasn't the best, but all in all, we had a decent run and were very happy with our performance. Not to mention, seeing people's reactions to us being good at this game made every second of practice worth it in my eyes. Originally, this was going to be the end of the story. I wanted to win this entirely non-important race and then dedicate a video to gloating about how my teammate and I overcame that challenge. But there was something bugging me. After winning the race, I couldn't help but feel like we were close to something big. And, well, we were. The run itself lasted a little over an hour, which is obviously nowhere close to the world record. But that's only because we collected the Chaos Emeralds, which aren't needed for the co-op category. So subtract the time it took collecting those, and lo and behold, we were actually really close to the record. We were right there. All we needed was optimizations where needed, and the record would become more than obtainable. Suddenly, this was what I wanted. Being a world record holder sounded amazing. Granted, it would be in a game no one cares about, but it would still be cool. Right? Right? Denny was less eager than me to spend more time playing this game, and I don't blame him. But through enough nagging, he eventually came around to the idea, and so we got right to practicing, but this time for the world record. The very first thing we did was pay some more attention to the solo runs, since we'd yet to check those out in greater detail. And we noticed quickly that these runs were undeniably more optimized than the co-op runs. The main difference wasn't the routing, it was mostly the tiniest of time saves in just about every act by utilizing more difficult movement. Most of which I didn't even have to learn, that burden fell upon Denny since he was our dedicated Sonic player. Anything new for me to learn, I'd have to come up with myself since there wasn't any footage of top-level Tails gameplay for me to reference. Which I suppose was kind of a cool thing to be able to say, because that meant that instead of letting pre-existing strategies define how I play, it was time for me to forge my own path. An unfortunately not very interesting path, because most of what I spent my time doing was learning the spots where I should be incorporating the pull mechanic I mentioned earlier. Honestly, as a Tails player, this is a good 60% of the job. I get right up to where we need to be and then pull Sonic right before the ledge so that he comes out at a good height for building speed. It's not something that requires a ton of skill to execute, but there's certainly a difference between a good pull and a bad one, with the former being riskier as you have more of a chance to mess up your timings. Besides practicing this and Denny learning some small time saves, us preparing for this world record makes for a pretty subpar story. There wasn't a new route, no riskier strategies, we were quite literally just doing what we did before, but better. And that's kind of boring from a narrative standpoint. To me, it looked like our run needed some kind of edge. It was starting to feel like getting the world record wouldn't be enough. Because if people were to watch our run, they'd see that we're just copying everyone else's run without much added on. What I wanted was some kind of new strat that would make people go, ooh, we should try that. And between Denny and I, we found something. Pretty early on in the game, in Act 2 of Sylvania Castle, there's a section of the stage where the water rises, and you're supposed to just clamber through it and get out. That was at least until Denny found this. Time save wise, this wasn't the biggest of deals, but aesthetically this was exactly the kind of sauce I was looking for. Problem was, we didn't know what caused it. It seemed inconsistent. Sometimes the water picked you up and sometimes it didn't. So I did some testing, and getting the water run consistently in this spot is weird. Running on the flat surface while the water rises doesn't work. Neither does running on a wall. Turns out the game only lets you run on the water if you're in the middle of this slope right as the water comes up. Yep, that's it. Don't know why it works this way, but hey, that's the trick. Oh, and also if 2 players do it at the same time, feel free to occasionally say hi to the one glitch we found in this game that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, sadly, for whatever reason, the game will sometimes crash if we do it at the same time, so we had to resort to just me doing it in our runs. But who cares, we'd finally found something flashy for our run. And yeah, this was such an inconsequential thing to pull off, it barely saves any time, but it looks cool if nothing else, and I was happy with it, so it was time to get the world record. Now, I'd love to tell you that this was some grueling experience where we battled against the game to scrape our way past the finish line, but no. In all honesty, this world record wasn't the hardest to get. We got it after only 2 days of attempts. Somewhat anticlimactic, I know. I really thought this moment would define and be the highlight of this video, and you probably expected similar given it's what I've been building up to. But don't worry, this isn't the end of the story, as you can tell by the amount of time remaining, which begs the question, why? What more is there to talk about? Well, to put it simply, while I was happy that we'd gotten the world record, I just couldn't overlook that our run was full of slip-ups scattered throughout. It was a decent run, sure, and a testament to how much we'd practiced the game, but it was undeniably unoptimized. And those slip-ups under a more popular speedrunning category would prevent us from getting that world record. Basically, it felt like we took advantage of how little this category was contested to get a somewhat superficial record. And I didn't like that. So instead of celebrating our new record, we instead went right back to running the game. Sounds kinda sad when I say it out loud, but I was having a good time, because as grim as it sounds speedrunning a game like this one over and over, I got to do it with a friend. And that genuinely makes all the difference. Besides, it really didn't take that long to beat the record we'd just gotten. And not long after that, we beat it again. And again. And again. Yeah, clearly we had some kind of problem. Literally no one was competing against us, yet here we were, slaving away at getting a better time, and you know what? I don't regret a second of it. Gone were the days of just wanting a world record. What we wanted now was an impressive world record, and our road to achieving that was by getting the elusive sub 40. To help put this goal into perspective, the previous world record holders for the co-op category sit at 43 minutes and 46 seconds. So we'd need to be at least 3 minutes and 47 seconds faster. And look, I know that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but in speedrunning specifically, that's a pretty huge jump. I won't pretend this would need to be a frame-perfect run, the time was definitely achievable, but we'd have to be on the top of our game. This run would be the culmination of everything we'd learned in our time playing this game, and we wanted to go out with a bang. We started theory crafting by taking another look at every single stage and figuring out which ones were truly perfected, so long as we didn't mess up, and which ones needed some further labbing. Lo and behold, a lot of them needed at least a bit of touching up, which was fine in and of itself, but became a problem when those newer strats felt inconsistent. There were 2 such stages where this was most apparent. Funny enough, I've mentioned both of these stages already, but they're Sylvania Castle Act 3 and White Park Act 3. Let's start with the first one, shall we? The main issue was surrounding this area, which you may remember from earlier where I showcased that cool launch we used to do. The problem with the launch though was that it was kinda slow. You had to wait for the ramp to be positioned correctly, and you had to exit and reactivate the twin ball, which takes up a few seconds. Basically, it was a lot faster to stay in the twin ball and try your best to jump over all the obstacles, but this was easier said than done. These ramps are a genuine pain to navigate. Mostly because their positioning depended on the timing we reached the area, which often varied because, well, we're not robots. And this led to so many resets. This new so-called strat was a nightmare, and honestly nearly made us give up on speedrunning the game for good. So I hit the lab. it was pretty clear to me what I needed to find. There was obviously a good cycle for these platforms, and all I had to do was discover when that time was and ways to get it consistently. Thankfully, right before you get down to the platforms, there's a moment where you're forced to wait before activating the twin ball. And since you're forced to wait anyway, I decided to use this to my advantage by waiting just a little bit longer than normal and then activating the twin ball at various intervals to find out what starting point would give the best cycle for the platforms. And after, well, a while, I was able to find this. Say hello to the Cal Bounce. This is easily the trick I'm the most proud of in our entire speedrun. Not just for the fact that I'm the one who found it, but also because it's consistent, fast, and looks baller as For those wondering, to activate a Cal Bounce, all you have to do is make sure you activate the twin ball around the 16 seconds 90 milliseconds mark. And once you've done that, you've already done the hardest part, and can more or less let the Cal Bounce do its thing. This trick was a savior for many reasons, with the main one being, we could finally get past Act 3 of Sylvania Castle consistently. How great is that? Now, the only main hurdle we were left with was White Park Act 3. This stage was an issue for somewhat similar but still different reasons. The main similarity was an obstacle that would be in different positions depending solely on the stage time. One that we struggled with not getting blocked by because the optimal method for getting by it quickly is finicky to the point where you need to make sure you're not going too fast through the stage or you'll end up bonking against this stupid thing. Not to mention that the small jump you do to get the skip was surprisingly difficult to land, and so even when en route to get the fast cycle, it would often happen where we'd mess up the jump and then be forced to wait and plow through without the twin ball. Because here's a fun fact about the twin ball. If you ever hit a wall while in this form, then you lose a lot of speed. See, the twin ball has 3 states, which we'll call fast, medium, and slow. In most scenarios, both of these are terrible because of their lower speed and worse acceleration. The whole reason you're in the twin ball is for the extra speed, and without it, it's mostly pointless. Point is, bonking on the wall is bad, and that tended to happen a lot when going for this skip. So I wanted to brainstorm a new strategy that would still let us go through the fast cycle, but more consistently. The solution to this ended up being surprisingly simple. Remember how I said we needed to deliberately slow ourselves down in this stage in order to reach the fast cycle? Well, after a while of trying different routes, I realized that we could go as fast as we wanted if we made sure that we jumped and hit into this wall right before going through the gap. Because doing this slows us down just enough to where we can get through without getting blocked. Some of you may be wondering though, isn't this a bad thing to do? After all, I literally just mentioned how bonking with the twin ball is something you want to avoid because it lowers the twin ball's speed state. Well, while true, that piece of information comes with an asterisk, because you can only bonk and lower your speed state when hitting a wall on the ground. However, if you hit a wall in the air, sure you'll lose a bit of momentum, but you're still in the fast state of the twin ball, which means that it'll speed right back up in no time. Anyway, that's all there was to making this stage more consistent. It's a very simple trick and obviously much less interesting than the coveted Cal Bounce, but hey, that's the 2 stages we were having the most trouble with finally figured out, which meant that we were ready for the big leagues. Sub 40 was about to be within our grasp, and after many hours of failed attempt after failed attempt, well, we got a run that I can safely say we're very proud of. I'm not going to say what time we got just yet, but bear with me, because I want to go through this run stage by stage so that I can showcase not only the work that Denny and I put into this, but also showcase what this game has to offer in a more direct way. Please enjoy. We start off our run with the very familiar Sylvania Castle, and unlike later on in the run, there isn't a lot to talk about here, is there, Denny?
That would be spot on, Caldy. All thanks to the fact that by this point, we practically knew this area like the back of our hands. Which adds up, since this is the area we would have to go through every single time we reset our runs.
It's no exaggeration to say that we had these 3 levels down to a T. It had become pretty rare for us to mess up, and not because they were incredibly easy or anything, but just because we were that familiar with them. The boss fight of Sylvania Castle, however, is a slightly different story. Only because speedrunning the bosses in this game is legitimately hard if you're trying to be optimal.
And it's not the bosses themselves that are hard. In fact, they are incredibly easy to beat. The only issue with them consistency-wise is that the key to a flawless boss fight is consecutive perfect hits, which is easier said than done due to it being trickier than meets the eye. While missing an optimal hit isn't the worst thing in the world, the time you lose will start to add up further into a run. Regardless, for this run specifically, it was these perfect hits we managed to pull off, with us achieving a flawless fight, netting ourselves a gold in the splits, and meaning it was the fastest we had ever beaten the Sylvania Castle boss.
I'm gonna have to give partial credit to the Cal Crush for that, which is a strat that involves me deliberately getting crushed by an item box before the boss fight begins. I'll admit that this started off as a joke, but we realized after a while that we were saving a few seconds every time I did this. Because as it turns out, Tails being in the safety ball makes you get through this cutscene much faster, since it no longer pauses and waits for him to awkwardly walk into place. So yeah, against all odds, the Cal Crush is an actually optimal strategy. But that's enough of Sylvania Castle. Let's move on to the next area, White Park.
This zone is a little trickier than the first, and you can see this even early on because right as we get into the first stage, there's an awkward jump that needs to be timed relatively perfectly in order to get the height we're looking for. Thankfully, we had learned from bashing our heads into the wall so many times that this jump was no longer a match for us, as we passed it, this time with ease. The next big obstacle of this stage comes in the form of this wretched ramp. See, this ramp is the equivalent of the game asking you to pick heads or tails every time you touch it. Because sometimes it launches you high onto the path you want to be on, and all is well. And other times, you pathetically lose all your speed and receive a fat time loss as you slip down the mountain. Both outcomes are entirely decided by luck, as far as we could tell. But thankfully, fortune favoured us on this occasion, and the rest of this stage was relatively straightforward.
Act 2 of White Park Zone has almost nothing of note. It's a very easy stage, and the one skip that it has I've already showcased earlier, so let's skip on to the third act, shall we? Maybe you'll remember this stage for having that annoying platform that we kept struggling with. Thankfully, us having difficulty with this section was a thing of the past, so long as we don't mess up, which in this run we obviously didn't. I mean, come on, it's our so-called God run, we're not gonna mess anything up. Except for that, apparently. Yeah, so fun fact, this run isn't technically perfect. We lost maybe 10 or so seconds on the slip up, which is kinda bad, but there was still hope for us because of the upcoming White Park boss fight.
See, this boss fight is entirely based around RNG. Metal Sonic randomly chooses which attack he'll use, and this means that if you get lucky, there's potential for a big time save. But the chance you'll actually save time is incredibly slim, and I'll demonstrate as to why with these two examples. In the run above, Metal Sonic is defeated earlier, and then in the bottom run, he isn't defeated until a few seconds later. Despite this, notice how the runs end up syncing when they move to the final section. This is because the ground that this fight is held on is procedurally generated in chunks, which means that defeating Metal Sonic quickly isn't enough. In order to save time, you'd need to defeat him so quickly that you skip an entire chunk. And to help put into perspective of how uncommon that is, we had never skipped one chunk of this boss in our hundreds of runs.
There is technically a way of improving your odds of achieving it though. Maybe you already noticed earlier, but some of the top speedrunners in this game play in an abnormal aspect ratio. Specifically, they play in 4:3 rather than the standard 16:9. And the reason why, as far as we could tell, is because in auto-running boss fights such as Metal Sonic and White Park, the boss is actually placed closer to you in 4:3 due to the game accommodating for the smaller screen size. This allows you to get hits in at a faster rate and gives you better odds at skipping a chunk and saving time, though it's still up to luck. And despite knowing that playing in 4:3 would give us an advantage, we still didn't want to use it because it made for the experience overall to be less fun with how scrunched the screen size was. You can probably tell where I'm going with this in regards to our actual run, and yes, against all odds, we looked out and somehow skipped that chunk, which saved us a solid 10 seconds, effectively nullifying our blunder in the stage before and allowing us to continue our run at a good pace.
Oil Desert was next on the menu, and when I say we started off well, I mean it. In this first stage, we hit every trick we could possibly ask for, and Act 1 doesn't hand them out cheaply. But hey, no complaints here. These tricks had cost plenty of promising runs, so it was about time we saw a little success. And speaking of success, it was another split written in gold. A small win on a stage we were very happy with. Moving on to Act 2, I want you to pay attention to how this clip plays out. See how I missed the spring, which should have cost us some time, and yet Caldi was able to recover things for us? While just a brief moment, I think it's a great example of what makes speedrunning this game in multiplayer generally less frustrating than playing on your own, all because we have each other's backs, and as often as we can. It's a good thing too, because this is yet another stage where there's an obstacle that's synced to the stage time. AKA, we need to pass through this area in specific time frames or we'll bonk and lose a solid 8 seconds in the process.
Fortunately, we were perfectly on pace and passed through without issue, which essentially concludes this stage, as the rest of it is smooth sailing from then on out. Up next was Act 3 of Oil Desert, and this is easily one of our favorite stages, if not our favorite, because, well, it's fun. I'd say that it has the most back and forth out of any level in the game in terms of Sonic and Tails switching places. And funnily, that can be a bit of a chore to slog through in single-player speedruns, but in multiplayer runs, it's much more dynamic and honestly satisfying to go through when we're both on top of our game. Like, come on, look at this, you can't tell me this isn't peak co-op gameplay. Okay, maybe peak is stretching it a little bit, but whatever, it's a good stage.
With it done though, all that was left of Oil Desert was the boss fight. And let me tell you, this is a slow one. Sure, you can once again save time by performing perfect hit in a similar vein to Sylvania Castle's boss. But it doesn't help this one feel any more engaging because of just how much waiting around there is. And that's not even mentioning the inconsistent hitbox, which is exactly as fun to deal with as it sounds. Let's just skip this one, okay?
You know, I wouldn't be against skipping this stage too, because Act 1 of Sky Fortress, in case you couldn't already tell, is an auto-scroller, everyone's favorite. For speedrunning specifically, this stage is boring and uninteresting, but it gives us a bit of a breather if nothing else. And as if the stage wasn't long enough already, it even throws a mini-boss fight right at the end of it just to really drag things out. Yeah, let's skip to Act 2. This stage, thankfully, is an actual stage, and so we were back to doing what we do best. In the past, I had previously struggled with remembering parts of this stage, but by the time of this run, I had long since left those days behind me. Yeah, I f***ed up. Yet another mistake. Fun, right? This happened because I accidentally activated my flight earlier than I normally do, and then didn't have a visual reference as to where I was, which led to me cancelling my flight earlier than I should have. All in all, this wasn't a run killer or anything, we lost around 7 seconds, but I was still very disappointed with myself.
What may come as a surprise though, is that we managed to turn things around. We landed every single other jump the stage had to offer, and generally played very well outside of that one slip-up, to the point where we somehow got a gold. Yeah, that was apparently the fastest we'd ever beaten the stage, which goes to show how well we played outside of that slip-up. It was then time for Act 3, and let me say, this stage is a tricky one. It's normal that we mess up something here, because it's frankly the nature of it. It's often nothing major, like some unoptimized movement here and there, but sadly, something much worse happened. It was, as foretold, this dreaded stage made Caldi's nerves get the better of him, and he activated the twin ball further to the right than we were meant to, costing us a number of seconds in the process. The real kick in the shin, though, is that we sadly couldn't make up for that lost time, and ended the level with a 10-second time loss. Oh, the horror!
It was demoralizing, to say the least, and I'll always be punching myself for that slip-up because it was so easily avoided. I don't know why I did that twin ball so far to the right, and I even realized it the very second that I did it. But alas, we finished that stage with no more problems and made it to the Sky Fortress boss fight. And this one is a fairly straightforward encounter. You wait for Metal Sonic to appear at the top, hit him as he goes by for a free hit, and then get your second hit in as he flies across, and all you have to do is rinse and repeat. Unless that happens, where he goes on the bottom instead of the top. To this day, we still aren't sure why this occurred. In almost every single one of our other runs, Metal Sonic never went on the bottom. At first I thought that maybe I flew too close to the bottom half of the screen and that caused him to go down, but I saw clips of me doing the exact same thing and yet lo and behold, he went up. This was annoying because Metal Sonic traveling on the bottom makes you lose out on a few seconds, all due to him not allowing us that freebie hit that we normally get when he travels on the top. But in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a big time loss and was neither of our fault, so there was no point in getting hung up over it. It was time for the final stage after all, and despite any small time losses we'd gotten, this was still an incredible run with how airtight the majority of it was, and we were making great time. All we had to do to secure this amazing run was to keep our momentum going as we entered the Death Egg.
Something that's funny about Death Egg Act 1 is that it actively tries to mess you up around every corner. Not that it's easy to tell what a corner is in this stage. See this? If you don't know your left from your right, you're about to forget your ups from your downs. There is one blessing in disguise, however, because this is the one and only Death Egg stage. The one following it is the final boss. And we were more than okay with this, because learning the mechanics for this level alone was hard enough. Quite satisfying to master though, I must say. It's like giving a big screw you to the level for all of the cheap gimmicks that it tries to throw your way. We did that and more too, because after nailing some perfectly timed jumps at the end, we had successfully secured ourselves yet another shiny golden split, which left us with only one thing remaining. Eggman!
This was it. Eggman was the final obstacle we had to overcome. All we had to do now was to not mess up and to not die, which for the most part isn't too hard to do with this boss, because all I have to do is fly up through these rings and then hit one of the vulnerable non-spiky segments of Eggman's weird heart robot before being sent back down and doing the same thing again. Thankfully, very simple. Though on the contrary, the final hit specifically is extremely stressful, because Eggman gains an impenetrable shield that can only be broken by using the twin ball against it. And to pair with it, the inner ring becomes filled with rotating spots of electricity on the floor which break the twin ball when you come in contact with them. It's nerve-wracking to say the least, because you can lose a lot of time here if you get unlucky with the electricity fields. But as to how it went in the run itself, well, I'll just let the clip play out.
Don't die. Okay, I'm just gonna...
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
No,
That'll break it.
That'll
break
it's the end. It's the end. There you go.
Okay, we got it. 39-30.
Thank you very much for a fantastic run. That is the first ever sub 40 co-op or solo, not counting Android. I'm feeling good about it.
And there you have it. We didn't just break the 40-minute barrier, we decimated it, putting us a whopping 4 minutes and 16 seconds faster than the previous record holders. And as you saw, the run isn't perfect. We technically could get a better one if we kept trying, but all things considered, this run was still an incredible one, and we played it extremely well. I'll tell you what though, if you feel you have what it takes to beat our time or at the least want to try, then by all means, give it a shot. You might end up having more fun than you expect, because speedrunning alone is one thing, but speedrunning with someone, with a friend, ended up being a much more fun experience than I could have anticipated, and is now something that I highly recommend trying out. With that being said, I think a ginormous shout out to the amazing Denny Meister is in order. Through this whole experience, I actually had the pleasure of meeting him recently at the Sonic Symphony in London, which was an awesome time, and I can confirm that both on camera and off, he's the realest of real, and a great guy. In case that wasn't blatantly obvious from the Pistol Pete cosplay. Now, this video obviously wouldn't exist without him, given he was my teammate, so please check out his channel if you're a fan of high quality content. And if you don't like high quality content, whatever, check it out anyway, send him love, because he deserves it. And once you're done with that, let me know what you thought of this video. If you enjoyed it, then leaving a like goes a long way in helping more people get to see it, and if you want more videos like this one, then tough, because I doubt I'm getting another world record anytime soon, but still feel free to subscribe if you want more videos from yours truly. I promise I'm not planning on taking another 2-year break right after dropping this. I have more planned, just don't expect them to come out at a rapid pace, let's just say. But with that, we have come to the end of the video. So, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.